Not long ago, in the smoking area of one of the libraries, I struck up a conversation with a middle-aged man of a very intelligent appearance. It was noticeable that he carried himself very reservedly and calmly. I can't even describe it in a way that is completely clear. But that's exactly how military personnel, seasoned by life experience and retired, behave. He proceeded to share with me a terrifying real-life story that I want to tell you. I want to clarify right away that stories about werewolves, which have proliferated so much on the internet, are mostly 100% fabrications by some writer. However, this particular case deserves credibility as it was narrated by a very serious individual. I am recounting the story in the third person, adding some life to the narration based on my interlocutor's account. The incident took place in the late 30s in the Kolyma region. It was an area with a concentration of many Stalinist labor camps where both political prisoners and criminals served their sentences. Harsh living conditions, unfavorable climate, and high mortality rates made the existence of prisoners doubly unbearable. However, one of the camps in the southwest of the Magadan region left a lasting mark on the memories of those who served there, compared to which all the other hardships and misfortunes of Stalinist repression seemed insignificant. Autumn was beginning. The taiga was going to sleep and preparing for winter. The snow hesitantly claimed new territories, day by day whitening the ground soaked with the tears of thousands of prisoners. One day, when thick fog lingered over the hills from early morning, and the sun barely peeked through the clouds, a squad of inmates was sent out to work, cutting down trees. It was at this point that one of the guards noticed very strange tracks clearly visible in the snow. They were imprints of bare feet. So what? You might think. Well, in Magadan, at this time of year, it was at least -7, and the person walking on the snow had covered about 5 kilometers without falling or freezing. Initially, everyone thought these were the tracks of someone escaping from a neighboring camp. It was the most logical conclusion that witnesses to this incident could come up with. But that was not the case. After 5 kilometers, the tracks began to transform. Claw marks became visible. Then the foot began to shorten and widen. At some point, the tracks took on a character as if someone was walking on all fours, with extremely grotesque legs. The prints resembled a mix of human foot with a wolf's paw. And after a few dozen meters, there were imprints of huge wolf paws in the snow. The tracks never stopped, indicating that the creature that initially had human legs, whose prints caught the attention of the guards and prisoners at the beginning of its journey from the camp to the logging site. On that day, 11 prisoners went missing. Yes, they tried to attribute it all to an escape attempt, but everything was just too strange. Bloody traces in the snow suggested that the prisoners were likely devoured by someone. And there were candidates. The surrounding area still harbored a large number of wolves and bears. However, such attacks had never happened before. In addition to these circumstances, throughout the day, both prisoners and guards heard strange growls and howls coming from all directions. It didn't resemble any known animal. The sounds were a combination of human wheezing and dog-like growling. Due to these truly horrifying circumstances, the guards violated the regime quite severely. They left work for the camp 2 hours earlier than scheduled. Even the fear of facing a tribunal did not stop them. And when approaching the camp gate, one of the guards turned around. What he saw sends chills down his spine even many years after that day. In the distance, about 70 meters away from the group, he was walking on the snow. A man covered in fur with a wolf-like elongated mouth, full of sharp teeth. His eyes shimmered with all possible shades of red and continuously watched the people walking. The vicinity of the camps always had good lighting, so it was not difficult to discern the details of the appearance of this creature. That's the story about werewolves that a random conversation partner shared with me. Whether to believe it or not is a personal matter, but testimonies proving the existence of such half-wolf, half-human beings are quite rare. We do not consider blatantly fictional stories created from imagination for entertainment. Witness accounts, on the other hand, are intriguing, and their horrifying real-life stories are likely to make the reader shudder and look around. It's not surprising, as according to their testimonies, encounters with werewolves almost always end in spilled blood. This frightening story happened to me in the 90s. At that time, I worked for a newspaper that covered anything unusual. Half of these stories were, of course, fictional, but some were based on real events. Our boss had a knack for mystical stories. I don't know where he found them, but if he sent someone on a business trip, it was definitely worth it. It was early autumn when our boss called me in and showed me an article from a small newspaper. It reported that in a small village in the Ural Mountains, small children were disappearing. 5 children in total, within a span of 2 months. The children vanished from the yards when there were no adults around. No one saw anything. A couple of times, they claimed to have seen a wolf and wolf tracks. That was all the information available. The boss suggested I go since I had the most realistic view of events. The next day, I set out on the journey. I had to take a train, and at the station, a driver, whom I had arranged with in advance, was waiting to take me to the village. Upon arrival, I started looking for a hotel, but there was none. A local family agreed to host me, a husband, wife, and 2 children aged 5 and 7. The children seemed unsociable, staring at me like wolves. The parents, on the contrary, were very friendly. They settled me into a small room with just a bed and a nightstand. Wishing the hosts a good night, I went to bed. I fell asleep almost immediately, influenced by the road and fatigue. During the night, I dreamed of wolves, large ones with a human gaze. I spent the entire night fleeing from them in my dreams. In the morning, I woke up feeling exhausted and with a headache. After washing up and having breakfast, I went to see the local police officer. When I inquired about the purpose of my visit, he was reluctant to provide information. However, a small monetary incentive led to me having addresses of families where the missing children lived. I went to the first address, and since the village was small, it wasn't far. I introduced myself to the parents of the missing child as an investigator from the district center. They showed me the place where they last saw their 5-year-old girl. It was the backyard of their house, all trampled around. Carefully examining the grass, I noticed several tracks resembling those of dogs. The strange thing was that there were traces of 3 animals, 1 large and 2 smaller ones. The same pattern emerged at the other locations. The tracks of 3 animals were present at each place where the children disappeared. After visiting all the addresses, I returned to my temporary home and started jotting down everything I had seen. Those tracks haunted me. I decided to ask my hosts about a dog with puppies. Maybe they knew something. The woman shuddered at my question and looked away, while her husband said that there were plenty of dogs with puppies in the village, and for sure, the tracks of these animals could be found in every yard, not just where the children vanished. After working with my notes for a while, I went to bed. In the middle of the night, I was awakened by howling and whimpering. Peeking out the window, I saw a wolf and 2 wolf cubs near the family's barn, gnawing on something. I decided to wake the homeowner, but neither he nor his wife and children were in the room. Maybe they went to someone else's place to spend the night. The wolves didn't let me sleep, and I sat watching them through the window. Closer to dawn, I realized something was wrong. The animals started to move around and transform before my eyes. Leaning closer to the window, I saw that in place of the wolves, a man and 2 children appeared. About 5 minutes later, I understood that it was the host and his children. A cold sweat ran down my spine. Moving away from the window so as not to be noticed, I watched as they stood up, and the landlady approached from the direction of the forest. They were all naked. After waiting for them to go inside and settle down, I secretly went to the place where the werewolves had been. There was a pile of rags. Stirring them, I discovered the remains of children. With trembling hands, I slowly returned to the house and gathered my belongings. I went to the local police officer and told him about my discovery, omitting the part about werewolves. The parents of the family were arrested on suspicion of murder and cannibalism. I left the village on the first train. Later, this story made it into the newspaper. However, there was no mention of werewolves. The narrative focused on the parents, who had gone insane, resorting to eating the flesh of little children, their own included. I'll tell you a story from when I was 8 years old. My mom worked as a nurse in the surgical department, and I used to be with her at the hospital. I really liked being there, especially walking along the long corridor at night where the lights flickered. It's hard to explain. It was mystically exciting and a little bit scary. It was around midnight, and the full moon was shining in the sky. I approached the window to watch it. At that time, my mom was in the middle of a surgery. Suddenly, I heard howling and then a woman's scream. I ran towards the direction of the howling and screaming. What I saw was a very strange scene. A teenager standing on all fours and a nurse who turned pale with horror. He howled again, started growling, and lunged at the nurse. Upon hearing the cries, not only I rushed over but also another nurse. She bravely approached the young man and said, "Hey, what's wrong with you? Wake up." Then she hit him on the back. To my surprise, he seemed to snap out of it and, not understanding anything, started asking what happened to him and where he was. The nurse explained everything to him and escorted him back to his ward. It's only now, at the age of 22, that I understand that the nurse who intervened prevented him from fully transforming into a monster. This incident will stay in my memory for a long time. That night in a small hunting hut, there was a feast for the whole world. The men were celebrating a successful hunt. It had been a long time since they had caught so much game. And here they had enough to distribute around the village, to salt, to make stocks, and to make a feast. A fire was playing merrily in the fireplace. A young boar was roasting on a spit. Beer, vodka, moonshine, and wine were generously poured into glasses. The village had 15 to 16 yards, and only 6 hunters lived there. Old grey-haired Fyodor was the oldest and luckiest hunter in the village. Many winters, wars, and terrible things have seen his squinted grey eyes, but his eyes are still clear and tenacious, and his hand is strong. His brother Theophan was 5 years younger, and in everything tried to imitate the elder, even in appearance. But if Fyodor was a hunter that is called from God, then Theophan rather followed in his footsteps. Actually, to be honest, he would have been more suited to the lifestyle of a merchant than a hunter. But even here his talent found a use for it. Like no one else, he was able to barter for money, food, seeds, clothes, and other things from merchants. There was a road through the village where merchants sometimes traveled furs, horns, skins, fangs, and other hunting trophies. Leonid and Alexei were guys of 25 to 30 years old. Lynia was a handsome young man. Tall, long blonde hair, bright blue eyes. The first guy in the village, all the girls go in droves. Lyoka is the complete opposite of his friend. Short, with brown eyes and dark, short, cropped hair. But with these differences, they were since childhood and each other's pride. As if they were apprentices to the brothers Fyodor and Theophan, but each of them thought himself an experienced hunter. It happened that their teacher's instructions irritated them. They loved to argue, but the boys were generally of a docile nature, and all disputes ended in peace. Their brothers sometimes joked with them, sometimes punished them severely, but forgave them, for they had been like them once. Nestor was a grown man of about 40. Short-cropped, with white hair and white beard, with a stern, gloomy look of deep-set grey steel eyes. Always sullen, never smiling. The villagers shunned him a little, so he lived alone in his shack. He had a dog, though. Nobody knew where he came from. A foundling. One morning, when the women were washing laundry in the river, he heard crying in the reeds. I was scared at first. What if it was a kookaburra, a waterbender, or a drowned woman? But we had to look. They looked, and there was a cradle. And in the cradle was a child wrapped in a towel, crying, screaming. Well, they calmed him down, brought him back, began to swaddle him. And there at the baby's feet there was a big silver cross with a gold chain, with a palm and small precious stones. It must have cost a lot of money. They decided to sell it to the merchants, but then they thought it was ungodly. They kept the cross and named the child Nestor in honor of Nestor the chronicler. And when he grew up, they gave him the cross. So he still wears it. He was a great hunter. Maybe he was inferior to Fedor as a tracker, but no one could beat him in marksmanship. He could hit a squirrel on a tree branch 30 meters away in the eye without missing. Sebastian, on the other hand, was a novice. He came from somewhere far away with merchants, liked it here and stayed. He was tall, about 30 years old, green-eyed, blonde hair, a snow-white smile of slightly pointed teeth, and small, slightly pointed ears. He quickly found a common language with everyone except Nestor, and was in the company for his own. By nightfall the weather had turned bad, and a thunderstorm was gathering. Thunder rumbled in the distance. Lightning bolts cut the sky and lit up everything around them. It was raining like a bucket. But in such weather it was pleasant to sit by the hearth, to look at the fire and drink in good company. During the conversation nobody noticed how midnight crept up. Only for a minute the full moon crept out from behind the black clouds that hid it. In that brief moment, Sebastian twitched, looked wildly out the window. The nails on his hands had slipped forward a little, and his hair had grown back a little, but no one seemed to notice. The moon disappeared, and he sighed with relief. And then he got up from the table and said, "Well, men, I'll go to sleep in the attic. I've had too much of your moonshine, Nestor. And in the morning we'll go hunting again." "Come on," said Fyodor. "Tomorrow I'll take Lyonya and Lyoka to the distant trails. Nestor will go with us, and you to the old place." Lyonya finished his glass of vodka and said, "Yes, stop wiping our snot. We're not little kids already." "Yes, not small children," echoed his friend Lyosha. "You will argue with the elders, and without a nose and without snot remain puppies," quietly said Nestor. He always spoke quietly, sharp, chopped phrases, and as a rule, everyone heard him. And the cronies heard. Lyoka started to get up, but rarely sat down on a chair, poured a mug of wine, emptied it at once, and the teenagers began to whisper. Theophans was discussing with his brother how to sell the booty to the merchants more profitably, and was already calculating the profit in his mind. Sebastian went up to the attic, glancing back down. He saw the look in Nestor's eyes, and he could have sworn he saw something in his eyes that was not kind and not human. It seemed that he was not a man, but someone else. With a shake of his head, he went up to the attic and went to sleep. Meanwhile, Nestor, after giving him a suspicious look, turned back to the fireplace and began to fiddle with a thick chain with a cross on it, a kind of rosary. It was well past midnight, and the weather had lightened a little. The clouds parted and the moon came out. It is not known who suggested to go to the river, to get some air, to breathe the air, and maybe to swim a little. But everyone liked the idea. Hunters, taking some alcohol and knives, went singing their favorite songs and telling bikes to the river. Nestor alone stayed in the house for a while, and then went outside. As he walked away, he was ready to swear he heard the clinking of glass behind him. But he went on, glaring unkindly. If they walked fast, they could reach the river in half an hour. They walked under the silvery light of the full moon, which illuminated everything. Raindrops glistened in its light. At first they paid no attention to the howling. Then it came closer and louder, and Fyodor was the first to notice. Everybody shut up. "Did you hear that?" "Yes, I think I heard it," replied his brother, a wolf howling. A wolf and a wolf. Do we not have enough wolves in the forest, or what? Lyoka asked. In the meadow, or whatever. What you again do not like? I, for example, as always quietly said, suddenly appeared behind the back of the young man Nestor. Something is not in the forest, but on the road, and it's getting closer. Do you ever remember when a wolf, even our tiger wolf, came so close to a man? That's the same thing. So what? There are 5 of us. We all have knives. What, we can't defeat some wolf? Or what? Nestor, you've already pissed your pants. How long have you been afraid of wolves? Well, let's go and see what kind of beast. I'll defeat it myself. And with these words Lyoka took out his knife and ran until no one stopped him, and the friend with him at the same time. Fucking hell, they've got a nerve, muttered Theophan. Let's go after them. The silence of the night, hitherto almost unbroken, was cut by a wild human cry, and then by the roar of a beast hitherto unknown to our hunters. As they rounded a bend, the brothers and Nestor stopped on the road and were horrified at the picture illuminated by the full moon. Leonia was sitting motionless with his back against a tree, which grew right next to the road. His entrails were spilling out of the corpse, which had been cut all the way down to the spine. Black in the light of the moon, the blood bubbled on the grass and spread dark, scarlet stain. In the clearing there was a deadly battle. 2 dark silhouettes were fighting. It was not clear where was the beast and where was the man. And then, as if in answer to the men's mental question, a body flew out of the tangle. From the torn neck wound was dripping blood. Lyoka. And in the middle of the clearing stood a beast. Anybody, but not a wolf. More than 2 meters at the withers. Wet fur in the light of the moon seemed silver. The beast leaned on its massive forelegs, clearly preparing to leap. Saliva mixed with human blood dripped from its huge mouth, dotted with white, sharp teeth. But more frightening were the eyes. Huge, bright yellow, blazing with fire. And there was no fear of man inherent in the eyes of beasts. Only rage, hatred, and bloodlust. Theophans fell to his knees, frantically crossing himself and shouting, "Save and preserve! Save and preserve!" The beast stood motionless. Nestor took out his knife, which now seemed to him a child's toy, and began to walk around the beast from the right. With his side vision he saw that Fyodor was doing the same. Suddenly, crouching slightly, the beast made a powerful leap toward Fyodor and in one fell swoop cut off his head. The head flew off a good 20 meters and stared at the moon with an icy gaze. Theophan, who was watching the picture, threw himself at the beast with a shout. The beast instantly spun around with a volley, but he was only a fraction of a second out of time. The old hunter jumped and plunged his knife straight into its heart. The beast reared up on its hind legs, 2 heads taller than Nestor, who was over 2 meters tall. The beast rolled. Nestor could have sworn it was a distorted, inhuman laugh. The beast grabbed the hunter with its paws, ribs cracking. Theophan screamed wildly. Nestor wanted to rush to his aid, but his legs did not obey. He froze as if in a sleep paralysis. In the meantime, the beast gnawed at Theophan's chest and tore out his heart. After swallowing it, it threw the lifeless body to the grass. Only the beast and Nestor remained. The beast picked up the knife with its claw and flicked it out of his chest. The knife flew off onto the grass of the clearing, which was covered in blood. The blazing gaze of Hell's eyes stared at the man. The creature growled muffledly. Nestor wrapped the chain around his hand and clutched the cross tightly. He recited all the prayers he knew, asking for help from the spirits of Tega. But there was silence in response. The beast jumped, covering 10 meters at a time. The hunter instinctively covered his face with his hand, and the creature clawed at it. Nestor realized that the beast had torn his arm off, but he felt no pain from the shock. Mechanically, he struck the beast in the face with the cross, shouting Our Father loudly. Black blood spurted. The beast rolled and flew away. Nestor had a chance, and he rushed to escape, lost in the taiga. That's the whole story. Did you have time to write it down, granddaughter? Asked the old man, unwinding the tube. Yes, I did. I'm a reporter, even though I'm a beginner. Thank you for telling me some of your stories, because I thought I had come on a business trip for nothing. Is it true that the hunters lived in this house? A young, beautiful girl pointed to the house behind the old man. The old men say they did. All 6 of them lived here. What happened to Nestor? And the 6th hunter, Sebastian? You never told me about their fate. I don't know Sebastian. Maybe the beast got him. Maybe he survived. But no one in the village has seen him since. And there's nothing left of the village. You saw it yourself. Just a couple of houses, and old men and old women live there, and I work as a forester. Sometimes young people come to visit, but rarely. And about Nestor. We've seen him, the one-armed one. He came in all glum and went to town with the first merchants. Why is the village deserted? It's a good place, fertile soil, plenty of game, it's quiet. There's a connection with the city and other villages. But they're afraid to live here. They believe in the curse and the werewolf. They don't get many visitors. Why do you live here and not in the village? It's better for me as a forester, closer to the forest. Grandpa, do you believe in the curse yourself? No, granddaughter. I've lived too long in the white world. I've seen a lot of videos, been through the war. I don't believe in evil. But people like to make things up. His eyes sparkled, but the girl did not notice it. Recorded 18.0317. Kalenina Alice, especially for the newspaper and TV show Unusual Near. The interviewee is an elderly man about 70 years old in the name of Vyacheslav Orbatov. He works as a forester. He is from Yakutsk. The subject: hunting stories, legends, folklore. Alice quickly muttered and turned off the recorder. Thank you again, grandfather, for the story. With a story like that, I'd be one of the best journalists in the magazine and TV program. Werewolves are such a popular topic now that Poltergeist and the housekeeper smoke nervously in the background. And here is such a big one, and with a touch of intrigue, because we don't know what happened to Nestor and Sebastian. The girl smiled. Oh, I'm late. It's getting dark. I have to go to the village, and tomorrow the car will come for me. Goodbye. Go on, granddaughter, go on. Have a good trip. God willing, we'll meet again. God willing. Goodbye. Kalenina put the dictaphone in her bag, and with a quick step she walked towards the village. At the border with the forest she turned around and saw that the old man was smiling and waving at her. She smiled and waved back. If the distance between them had been less, and the light had been greater than twilight, the girl would have seen that the old man was rather grinning, and from beneath his thick grey eyebrows his red-green eyes shone with a gleam that was not the glow of old age. Sebastian was stroking the long-healed scar on his left cheekbone.